Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We appreciate you taking time out of your day to listen to our topic today, building a multi-layered defense for IBM security. I'm Bill Hammond. I'm the Director of Product Marketing here at Precisely, and I'm really pleased to be joined today by a couple of other speakers. Boris Breslov, who's our Principal Technology Architect here in our security space, and then also by Denise Tabor, our Senior Product Management Director, who covers the IBM security products for us. And again, our topic today is about what you can do in your IBM security to build a stronger defense around that. So our conversation today is going to follow this path. Security threats out there are just constantly evolving. They're changing every day. New threats come on board. Other threats get patched. It's just the way we're always going to be. Security, I like to say this, I've heard other people say it, security is not a destination, it's a journey. You just need to continually be looking at your security on an ongoing basis and reacting to these threats as they come in. So we'll be talking about some of the vulnerabilities that exist out there. Boris is going to talk about some real world example of an IBM security vulnerability that on IBM and what you can do about that. And then talk a little bit about what we think our recommendation for your approach to your security ought to look like. And it's this multi-layered defense idea. And then we're also going to cover some of the more recent enhancements that we've added to our Assure Security portfolio. Denise is going to cover those for you. There's been a number of significant things that we've added to the product over the last several months, and we just wanted to kind of catalog those and bring those to everyone's attention. And then we should have some time for a little bit of Q&A at the end. I will tell you right now, because it's a question we generally get, we are going to be recording the presentation. You'll get a link to that recording as well as a copy of the slides. So don't feel like you've got to take everything that's down on the slide. You will get a copy of these later. And if you do have questions, obviously you can put them in the Q&A section of the interface that you're looking at right now. And we'll get to as many of those as we can at the end. Okay, with that as sort of our introduction, I'm going to cover my section first, which is kind of, what's going on in the marketplace and how things are evolving. And certainly, the security landscape just continues to be challenging and new things are happening all the time. I kind of broke these trends that I wanted to talk to into two different areas. What I consider business impacts, things that are happening in people's businesses, and then also marketplace impacts, some of the broader trends that are causing some of these things. So within our customers' businesses, what we tend to see is that security is becoming more of a global or a centralized or a company-wide sort of concern. It's no longer a siloed security approach that's platform by platform or specific, a lot of point solutions being thrown at it, things like that. It's generally getting attention at a centralized level and higher up in the corporate management structure because of the risks around security. So it's becoming a much more visible threat than it used to be. So the security issues are being driven sort of at the business level. Another thing that's important is multi-factor authentication continues to be, when I read analyst reports and articles and different things, multi-factor authentication continues to be like the number one thing. If you're going to do something to improve your environment and you haven't enabled multi-factor authentication, it's critical that you do it. It's required for many of the individual compliance and regulations that are out there. It's kind of started off in the financial institutions around the world, really, but it has really found its way into just normal day-to-day course of business. I think, we all can resonate with the idea that we log onto websites, certainly our banks, our 401ks, those kind of financial institutions force us to use MFA, but more and more just call them consumer websites are using multi-factor authentication. And it's for good reason. It's one of the best single things you can do to control access to your environment. So multi-factor authentication is something that Most businesses have rolled off to some extent. The question sometimes for us is, have they extended that to their IBMI? So important thing there. Um, the the literature, if you want to think of it that way, the press around security and the risks and the penalties and the pain that it causes for companies has really driven the visibility of security, as I stated in my first point, kind of more at the centralized business level, but also really up to the boardroom. It's something that's a concern at the highest levels of the corporation, and they're looking for strategic approaches to how to make the security better. They're looking for the IT teams to come to them with, here's how we need to approach this problem, this vulnerability. We have an answer. We have an approach that we want to use. And they're looking for those strategic approaches to that risk management coming from the IT teams and bringing it to them. And they're the ones that hold the purse strings. So they're the ones that will fund those kind of initiatives. And then finally, cloud integration is another area that's sort of impacting security. If you look at security surveys, there's a number of them out there all the time. One of the things that generally comes up is the need and the struggle that people are having with having data that lives on-prem. Some of the data is in the cloud. They're living in these hybrid environments, and making sure that your on-prem security and access management and those kind of things are that is carried over to the cloud, and that you made sure that your security in the cloud is at least as strong, if not stronger, frankly, than it is for your on-prem stuff. So continuing to focus on the correlation between having your security effective in whatever landscape or location that your data and your applications and your workloads happen to live. As I think we all can recognize, more and more of us are living in that hybrid environment where it's not all in one place. So with those as kind of some things that are impacting businesses, from a marketplace standpoint, broadening out a little bit, there's a couple of things that are impacting the marketplace around security. And I would be remiss, right, if I didn't bring up artificial intelligence as a topic on a webinar. It seems like no matter what the general topic is, artificial intelligence is changing the landscape, as it were. I wanted to point out here the interesting element that's going on with AI in the security space. It is doing some things that can help companies make their security better. Using AI grounded tools and taking advantage of some AI things can actually help in your security environment. And that's great. But the sort of double-edged sword that we need to keep in mind is AI is available to everybody. So as much as it can help corporations and, let's call it, the good guys, the bad guys also have access to artificial intelligence, and they can make their threats more effective with the use of AI. So AI is absolutely impacting the marketplace, but it's not a net positive or really a net negative. Just realize that AI is a useful tool, but it still is available to both the good side of things and the bad side of things. So use it where you can. Product consolidation is happening in the marketplace, where companies are looking for less of a point solution sort of approach to security, and looking to more of a broad platform, more holistic approaches, if you will, from trying to limit the number of vendors or number of products. So product consolidation is impacting customers from the standpoint of wanting to simplify their life and their security landscape and posture. Another one that's not new, but it's still out there and is still being very impactful, are regulations. We tend to have a lot of conversations with customers as new regulations come into play. There's a new one in Europe right now, for example, called DORA, that is not just about security per se, but it's actually about recovering from a data breach. And you have to prove that you're able to do that. It's primarily focused around financial institutions right now, but as we know, a lot of those regulations can kind of flow from one vertical market into all the others. So these regulations continue to drive a more rigorous approach to security, both from a reactive and a proactive standpoint. So regulations continue to drive change. It's very hard to stay on top of all of them for your industry, let alone for your industry across all the global spots where you may be doing business and having to be responsive to those regulations as well. So it's not an insignificant thing for companies to have to stay on top of all the different regulations that they're in charge of. Another one that's out there, it's really on the cusp of starting to be really impactful, but it's something we need to be thinking about, is that our current encryption technology in general is potentially vulnerable as quantum computing solutions with very, very powerful computing capabilities, kind of the next generation of computers, these quantum computer environments, are going to be able to break those encryption algorithms that we all use today. So there's a lot of thought being given to quantum safe cryptography. This is a big thing for IBM. If any of you are familiar with anything on the IBM Z, the mainframe platform, this has become one of the big pillars that they're talking about going forward for security, is quantum safe cryptography. So this is something that maybe is not something dramatically impacting people yet today, but it's a thought process people need to start getting involved with to make sure they're positioned as this becomes more commonplace and as quantum computing becomes more prevalent. So with all of those kind of marketplace and business challenges, I wanted to refresh everyone or take a look at maybe the IBM I, kind of the unique security challenges around IBM I. There's a couple, we may have heard some or all of these before, but it's probably a good idea before I hand it over to Boris to start talking about what you can do to layer your defenses around this. What is it about IBM I that's sort of unique? And one of the things that can cause people problems, frankly, is this perception that it's a secure platform, out of the box, that I don't need to worry about it too much because it's secure. Well, it's a very secureable platform, as we always say, but you need to be focused on making sure that you do that work to make it secure. And again, Boris will be talking about more of that. So don't have that false sense of security that I don't need to worry about my IBM I because it's secure. It's absolutely not true. Securable, but you need to be paying attention. IBM I environments are talking with and interfacing with many more systems and applications than they used to. The web has driven a lot of that, just the hybrid nature of cloud computing things. The more a platform interacts with those outside applications or data, the more potential vulnerabilities that exist for that system. So, each of those times the IBM I is connecting to something else is a vulnerability that you need to make sure you're paying attention to. Skilled staff shortage. It can be hard to find IBM fluent people in the marketplace. It can be even harder to find IBM fluent people who deeply understand the security issues around the IBM I platform. So finding those people is not as easy as just putting an ad in the paper and finding them. So as we get people retiring, as people move on to other opportunities, backfilling for those kind of positions can be a real challenge. And that's something that's kind of a unique problem of the IBM I. Frankly, it also exists on the IBM mainframe. They have that same sort of brain drain problem as people retire and those positions become available. Another IBM I issue here is just the landscape of security threats is changing. While the cybersecurity, really cyber criminals, they're always looking for new ways to access things. The IBM I is a very target-rich environment. It holds a lot of important financial data. It holds customer data. It's a environment that is very attractive to the kind of things that these cyber criminals want to do. So again, even more important to make sure you're not giving credence to the idea that it's secure and I don't need to worry about it. These new continued attacks are something you need to constantly be staying on top of. And the final point I'll make, and it's sort of related to the last point here, is IBM is really good about putting out updates when they find a vulnerability, which they will find. It's not a criticism. It's just the reality of this evolving attack landscape is vulnerabilities will get discovered. IBM does a great job of patching those vulnerabilities and as fast as they can getting them out to the market. But they do no good if IBM has issued a patch for it and you don't apply it on your systems. So it's critical that you stay up to date with all of the enhancements and updates that are part of your IBM environment. That's operating system, that's applications, all of the above. So any of those things left unpatched give you a large potential for vulnerability and a security breach. So keep up with your updates, do them as fast as possible. That's a really important message to send. So now I do want to turn it over to Boris to get into this conversation about what can I do in my environment, what kind of vulnerabilities exist, and how can I set up myself in the best way possible to build my defense. So Boris, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Bill. So let's expand on that last point that you made, the need to patch vulnerabilities in a timely manner. You may have noticed there has been a spike in vulnerability news lately. We thought it would be beneficial to take a closer look at the security vulnerabilities and what organizations can do to address them. So essentially, vulnerabilities are discovered all the time, and it's a matter of time until the next vulnerability is revealed. And it's not just about the IBM iOS vulnerabilities. It's about any software that runs on IBM I. So as long as there is a developer developing software, errors could be made, and those errors could be exploited. That's simple, right? So these are reported or known vulnerabilities. And then there is what is called a zero-day vulnerability, which is a vulnerability unknown to its owners and developers. So until the vulnerability is fixed, threat actors can exploit it in what is called a zero-day attack. So you see where I'm going with this. The best security practice is to patch vulnerabilities as soon as a fix is available for it. But more must be done to address zero-day vulnerabilities. Next, please. Okay, so regarding IBM I vulnerability notifications and reports, I suggest to subscribe to the IBM I security bulletin notifications. You have a link there. You can follow and then select the IBM I product and then select the flash and security bulletin document types. There is also a nice video in that link that explains how to do it. Then once you get a notification, I suggest to examine it and determine the severity and relevance to your environment, like the specific component of or software in question, the OS version, etc. Also, what I like about the notifications is that there is usually a link to an X-Force vulnerability report that helps to determine severity. We'll show an example of such a report in the following slides, but before we do, let's take a look at the two important security concepts that will help us understand the vulnerability reports. And I'm referring to the cybersecurity objectives and the hacking methodology. Next, please. Okay, so what are security objectives? And I'm giving here the NIST definition of cybersecurity. It's a bit lengthy, but essentially it's about prevention of damage to and protection and recovery of computer systems and services and the information in them to ensure confidentiality, integrity, and availability, which is known as the CIA triad. Now, with regards to the CIA triad, confidentiality is about prevention of unauthorized access. Integrity is about information being consistent and accurate. And availability is about information being readily accessible. This is important to understand. Normally, I hear people refer to confidentiality when they talk about security. Things like granting access to a file or a database. But if the database is unavailable, what good does it do, right? That's why availability is part of security. An example of an attack on availability could be a denial of service attack, or DOS, or DDoS, a distributed denial of service attack. or simply a malicious actor deleting a file or a database. Integrity is not less important. It's even harder to detect integrity attacks than the other two. For example, a malicious attack changing a shipping address in a distribution database and essentially sabotaging a supply chain operation. Okay, next, please. Now, let's talk about the hacking methodology. Well, it's really not as formal as it may sound. This is actually an ethical hacking methodology, but these are also the main phases of the typical malicious attack. So first step is reconnaissance, which is about collecting information about the target. So any information available on the internet, people working for the target organization, services provided by the target organization. So all this information could be very valuable in the following steps. The second step is enumeration and scanning. This is where a malicious actor would try to get more information about the system and applications and their versions. For example, knowing the version of the SSHD server could tell the malicious actor if it's vulnerable to a certain attack. This is when the first contact is made with the system. The third phase is gaining access. Now that the malicious actor knows of certain vulnerabilities, they will try to exploit them. The next phase is privilege escalation. In this case, the previous phase could only give the malicious actor a simple user, although it could lead to serious consequences already depending on the target system. Applications, um, but having the admin authority is the ultimate price. We have an example of such vulnerability in the following slides. And then the next phase is maintaining access. This is when backdoors are installed for future control of the systems. And the final phase is cleanup. Things like deleting malware used for exploitation, clearing logs, etc. Next, please. Now that we've covered the security concepts, we're ready to look at the X-Force vulnerability report. So let's see an example. Next, please. Or maybe before that, let me just clarify real quick what X-Force Exchange is. According to IBM, X-Force Exchange is a threat intelligence sharing platform that can be used to rapidly research the latest global security threats, aggregate actionable intelligence, consult with experts, and collaborate with peers. IBM X-Force Exchange is intended primarily for security analysts, but anyone in the security space can get value from XFE, including members of Security Operations Center, network security operators, security managers, and CISO. And I would add IBM security administrators as well. And next, please. Okay, so now back to the report, to the example. Like I said, this is just an example, and in this case, a vulnerability is in the IBM performance tools, which could allow local users to gain elevated privileges due to an unqualified library call. Malicious actor could cause user control code to run with the administrator privilege. Now remember the privilege escalation phase in the hacking methodology slide, so this is it. And as you can see, the consequence of this vulnerability exploitation is gain privileges. We assume that the malicious actor has already gone through all the previous phases and now has access to the command line or some other form of access that allows to run commands on IBM I. For those who don't know, an unqualified library call is when a program calls another program without specifying the library name. In that case, the OS looks in the library list to find the target program. And this is a security vulnerability because a malicious actor could change the library list and put the malicious program in a different library, or place the malicious program in a library that is already in the library list if they have access to it. So you can see how this way the calling program could call a malicious program. This is when it's even more dangerous if the calling program adapts authority of a profile that has special authorities. Okay, so what else is there? The CVS version 3.0 base score. This is important information because it determines how critical the vulnerability is. We can also see information about the attack. The attack vector is local, which means the malicious actor already has access to the command line. Attack complexity is high, so you can already see how this can affect the score, right? Also, we don't see how exactly the attack could be performed for obvious reasons, right? We don't. It doesn't make sense to give too much information to someone to exploit it, right? But it just tells me that someone trying to exploit this vulnerability would need to put a lot of effort into it. That's what it means. And then the required privilege is none, which means there is no need to have a special authority to exploit this vulnerability. Then user interaction is also none. Sometimes the malicious actor would need to wait for the end user to do something to trigger a vulnerability. In this case, it's not needed. The malicious actor could exploit the vulnerability without user interaction. And finally, impact on all three security objectives is high. That means that the malicious actor will be able to have access to sensitive and confidential information, change or delete it. All these components determine the base score 7.4. And next, please. Okay. So now that we know how to read a vulnerability report and that there are known and zero-day vulnerabilities, what can we do about it? Let's see some solutions. So, well, the obvious response to known vulnerabilities is patching, right, or installing fixes. But it's easier said than done because you wouldn't want to disrupt the business. So what we need is a system that will add visibility into the patch management process and help everyone understand how to deal with different vulnerabilities. That system is what the IT security professionals call a security program, which is a formalized, continuous, and measurable security strategy, documented by policies, standards, procedures, and guidelines. And we can use a patch and configuration management standard to define a response time criteria for different CVSS base score levels. For example, we could say that for the score between 7 and 8.9, we need to install a fix within 4 weeks, for example. And for the score between 9 and 10, the need to install a fix is 48 hours because it's more critical. These are just examples, of course. So remember the example report, we would need to install a fix for that vulnerability in 4 weeks, according to our example criteria. So this is the standard for the known vulnerabilities and their fixes. What about zero vulnerabilities? Sorry, zero-day vulnerabilities. So the answer is risk management, which is another component in the security program, because that's how we deal with the unknown. right? We deal with the unknown with the risk management. And it's a process that will help us to assess risks based on the analysis of threat actors, threats, and vulnerabilities, and eventually determine a risk response. There are different ways to respond to risks, but today we'll focus on risk mitigation, and that's when the layered defense comes into play. And if you need more information about the holistic approach, there is a link there to another presentation I did at the Common Power Up 2024 conference. So you could download that presentation, and please let me know if you have any questions or suggestions. Next, please. Okay. Speaking about zero-day vulnerabilities, we can't just fix them, right? So what can we do? And we can do what is called layer defense. The idea is that if a certain vulnerability is exploited, one of the controls could stop the attack or at least delay it until the security team takes action. And today, we would like to show you how layered defense can be done with the Azure Security suite of products. So essentially, it can be used to form 4 layers: networks, system, object, and data security. Under network security, you can use Azure SAM and Azure MFA to control access to services and applications. Azure SAM, which stands for System Access Manager, is what is known as exit point security. It doesn't replace the OS authorization, but can be very powerful as an additional layer. Azure MFA provides an additional authentication layer. So you can see how it all works together. Under system security, you can use Azure AMR, which stands for Azure Monitoring and Reporting. It can be used to monitor system events and system configuration. For example, system values or user profiles and their authority to execute tasks on the system. Then you can use Azure EAM, which stands for Elevated Authority Manager, to give access to system resources based on the least privilege concept. So instead of giving someone full access to the system, consider giving access to the resources based on a specific task and only for a limited time. And by the way, all that while the user session is being recorded. Really cool, right? Especially if you think about performing tasks on a production system. In addition, you can use Azure SAM to restrict access to specific commands. And moving on to the object security layer, where you can use Azure AMR to monitor object authority and Azure EAM to give access to objects, again, based on the least privilege concept. And finally, in the data security layer, you can use Azure encryption to protect data from unauthorized access. And next, please. So now let's assume that the vulnerability example that I showed in the previous slides were a zero-day vulnerability. And let's see how a layered defense could have helped to stop or at least delay an attack. So just to remind you, it was a vulnerability in the IBM I performance tools that could allow a local user to gain elevated privileges due to an unqualified library call. The malicious actor has already gained access to the IBM I command line. And now back to the layer defense. Use Azure SAM and MFA to control access to the system so the attacker would not be able to exploit the vulnerability in the first place, right? Use Azure SAM to control access to the create program commands and the file transfer. Now, if you think about it, for this vulnerability to be exploited, someone would need to be able to compile and create a malicious program or transfer it to the system. Why would anyone need to create a program on a production system, right? So those actions can be controlled and monitored. Then use Assure AMR to monitor security audit journal for access to commands and sensitive files. Now here the idea is that you may be able to alert of suspicious activity. Then use Assure EAM to monitor admin sessions on production systems. So in this case, we're talking about IBM I performance tools. Is there a need to run performance tools on a production system on a daily basis? Well, if not, Assure EAM can be used to allow access to the tools and record interactive sessions. And then use Assure encryption as the last line of defense to prevent data theft. So this is very important. If you configure correctly with the third-party key manager, a malicious actor would not be able to read sensitive data even after getting security officer authority by exploiting the performance tools vulnerability. So that's the layer defense with Assure Security suite, and I give it back to you, Bill.
Actually, I think we're going to pick up with Denise now, aren't we? We sure are.
Yes, I am here. And let's talk about some of the things that we've done most recently to help protect and control and monitor your potential exposure in your IBM I environments. So we have spent a lot of time enhancing these products, expanding the reach to help you control and monitor your security exposures. In the latest service pack, we released 3 significant enhancements, and this involved enhancing the user interface. What that does is it'll streamline the implementation of security policies. And then we also released a stronger encryption algorithm to protect sensitive data. And we've also added a function within our license manager to provide LPAR mobility. So I'm going to go into these features a little bit more in detail. So one of the things that we're trying to achieve here with the modern UI is allow the administrators to gain some productivity and efficiency benefits. There's a reduced learning curve because the product actually helps guide you with an intuitive wizard. You'll avoid errors by interfacing with the system correctly, and you can complete tasks faster with available functions such as drag and drop down menus, and finally, the graphical interface will help it be more accessible. Now, we introduced our web-based UI with our multi-factor authentication solution, which allows administrators to define rules to authenticate access to the IBM I systems. We then expanded this UI to include Assure monitoring and reporting basic functionality, where we've laid down a foundation for working with security-related reports by providing ways to allow you to quickly review security-based topics, such as reporting on object authorities or database changes, and reviewing system events. Another improvement provided recently was a strengthening of the encryption mode. We recognized the need to analyze our encryption techniques, and therefore we wanted to adopt a better algorithm to provide our customers with stronger data protection. Remember, it's really best practices to rotate encryption keys on a regular basis, and the adoption of this new algorithm, which should be on your plans when you get ready to do that again. You can go into our encryption product, migrate a field at a time, or I would also encourage you to contact us about an exclusive solution called Encrypt While Active. This will provide you with a more automated way to rotate your keys in addition to reducing the downtime required for this activity. The last item I wanted to describe today is using a function within our license manager. Assure Security can now provide limited LPAR mobility. We can now support a way where you can move your LPAR to another system, and the key will continue to function for a while you request additional generated key. This will help ease the transition and ensure continuity during a transitional phase. We'll continue to improve this area, but this was a really good first step towards cloud enablement of license keys.
All right. Thanks, Denise. Thanks, Boris. Appreciate all that insight. And we're at the point now where we can look and see if we've got any questions that the group here can answer. Let me check this list here. We do have a couple. We got a time for probably both of these. I'll take the first one. The first one is related to something I think I talked about, which is our current encryption algorithms already vulnerable, and I assume that means from quantum computing. I mean, theoretically, yes. The issue with quantum computing is it's not yet something that is, available to everybody. It's not widely deployed. It's certainly very, very expensive. I think my point in bringing it up is that it's something we need to be looking into the future at, both from a precisely standpoint as well as customer standpoint. But what we know is that in the future, those current algorithms are likely to be vulnerable to an attack using frankly, the computing power of quantum computing to break those algorithms. So, we're certainly looking at it. Customers need to be thinking about it as well. It was more, I would call it in the, looking out on the horizon kind of a problem than it is a today problem that there's a need to solve. So current encryption algorithms, for what we know today, are probably fine, but we do need to be looking at how to make things more bulletproof in the future. Okay, Denise, I guess I'd kick this one to you. How do I go about upgrading the encryption algorithm I already use to the new one? Denise?
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
The most recent Service Pack 7.0.15, you'd want to upgrade to that or anything subsequent to that. That would contain the ability to upgrade to the new encryption algorithm. So that was the most recent one, but we do encourage you to adopt that as soon as you can.
Okay, great. That's the only two I see in the queue right now. Sometimes we have new ones that come in as we're shutting down here. We be assured that if you've typed something in the Q&A panel, we will get back to you with an answer. So if you're doing something now, go ahead and do it. But I'll just take this opportunity to thank everyone on the call today for taking time, like they said, out of your day to participate and listen to what we had to share. I hope you found it valuable. Thanks to Denise and to Boris for their preparation and their presentation here today. So thanks to everyone, and we look forward to seeing you on our next webcast. Thanks.